Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, new novel, new single, full length album on the way. How much is the pandemic responsible for this burst of creativity here?
Nothing. The pandemic got in my way, and I actually didn't write anything during the pandemic until 3 weeks ago, because I was like, "Shit, I've got to make sense of this for myself." And I wrote a long short story that I really like. That's kind of pandemic centric, whatever that means. But I did nothing. I did nothing. I mean, I had a reshoot on a movie. That was it. I didn't write. I was pretty lame. I mean, I was in New York for most of it. Then I was in LA. Then I was back in New York, and I was just kind of taking care of my son. We were quarantining together, and I was cooking, which I've never done before, and I probably should never do again.
Are you are you,
And
are you any good at it?
I'm horrible. My son, we have this routine. Well, there are two things. There are two things that happened. One was I tried to make these keto brownies, which are like healthy brownies,
Mm.
like high protein brownies. And I made them. I brought one through to my son. I walked somewhere else in the apartment, and I hear, "Dad." He's 18. I go, "Yeah," and I was like, "That doesn't sound right." So I went back in, and he's holding the brownie up like there's a bite mark in it, and there's a fat water bug. Do you know what a water bug is?
Yeah, that's great. That's good.
So those became known as the cockroach brownies, the high protein
Hold
cockroach
on.
brownies.
And how did the water bug get in the brownie?
He got in the batter, I guess, when at some point I had mixed it up and walked away or whatever, and he drowned the happiest water bug that ever, the healthiest, happiest sweet tooth water bug that ever lived, and then he got baked into it, and luckily I could see that my son had not ingested. He'd somehow just bitten right before the water bug. So there's that, and then we have this routine. I claim that the smoke alarms are oversensitive in my, but every fucking time I cook, the smoke alarm goes off. My dog starts to pan. The smoke alarm really bothers my dog every time, like sends him back to some trauma. And and my son comes out of his room like Superman with a towel, waving at the smoke alarm like this. But he's there. He's on it like this now because he just expects it. Like as soon as that thing goes off, he's out of the. And he's doing this.
I think you're onto something that is probably the smoke alarm's fault.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. This is your fourth novel, your
Yeah.
third album. Why is it so important for you to have these creative outlets outside of just acting?
I don't know. I don't know why it's important. I mean, I think in terms of the novel, it's really I wanted to get into that arena where I was like in conversation with other books. I mean, I've been a reader forever. I went to school. I was going to be an academic in literature, so I've been in conversation with books my entire life, and I I always wanted to be in written conversation with them as well, a novel to novel, because I do believe there's a conversation, a historical conversation that goes on between novels, and I wanted to get involved in that. And so that's why it's important to me as a person to fulfill that part of myself that was primary, that predated acting, that predated anything I've been interested in. Really, it was my first interest. The music is a complete surprise. I'd never thought that would be any part of my life, and I just sit here surprised when I have a song, and I fully expect never to have another song come because I don't know where they came from and I don't know where they're going, but I'll just keep writing them as long as I hear them.
Well, but I suppose that if we delineate between acting and novel writing and singing and songwriting, but I suppose if you're creative, you're just creative, right?
Well, I mean, I think so. I mean, all these things are about expression, and they're different. They're different ways to express.
Right.
They're using different forms, mediums, tools. You know, in acting, obviously, you use your face and your body and your voice, and in music, you use your voice and your other instruments. And in writing, you're using words, but you're using them musically. I mean, I feel like when I'm writing prose, it's the rhythm and music are very important to me when I'm writing. Rhythm and music are important to me when I'm acting, and obviously when I'm doing music as well. So they're all different, but there's common denominators, and it's always about, you know, what do I want to express? What's the best venue for that to come out? This idea, I have an idea. What does it want to be? Does it want to be a show that I'm going to try to develop so I can play that part? Or is it just a song? Is it an idea for a song? Or is it an idea for a novel? Is it that weighty? Could it sustain that kind of architecture? And those are just questions that I have, and I'm lucky enough to be able to take whatever idea I have and say, where does it fit amongst these things that are available to me?
Let's talk a little bit about the book. Truly Like Lightning. It's the story of a Hollywood stuntman with a name curiously similar to mine who converts to Mormonism, and it's a deep experience that changes his entire life. Do you understand that impulse, the embracing, casting everything aside and embracing deeply a faith?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had that conversion myself, and I'm not sure that I could. I don't know if I have that leap in me. I may be too rational. I may be too literal, but I don't know. But what I do relate to is the quest for bedrock, the quest for truth, the quest for a way to live that is authentic and real and just and spiritual. And, you know, I see it all around. And that was one of the things I wanted to address in the book was, you know, all the people in the world, you know, that were reacting the last 5-6 years to these huge shifts in culture, you know, from Me Too into Black Lives Matter and Trump and Brexit. And they all come with cultural revolution in a way. And I see people just struggling to keep up with the changes and to ask themselves, well, what remains that's true? What remains underneath can there be a truth that underlines all those things?
You know, and you think people look to God, to faith for that?
I think so. I mean, I think that's a way to ride out cultural change, is to say, well, I know one thing doesn't change, you know.
And you haven't been able to find that yourself. It's curious to me that you see a value in it.
I guess all that I have found is it's not programmatic or dogmatic like that. It is your basic humanistic value system,
right?
Which values justice and fairness and equality and science and poetry. So it starts to get music, and it starts to get a little weighty there. But I don't know. I haven't seen a system. Maybe Buddhism, who knows? But I can't get on board with the reincarnation, though. That's a very serious kind of a leap that I can't make there.
Right. All right. And I realize we just met, and it sounds like I'm about to start handing you pamphlets through Zoom or something like that, you know? It's also interesting, David, that these families living out in the desert away from society, and you're in LA. I mean, you could not be, or in New York, you could not be more surrounded by society. What's attractive to you about that?
Oh, I would love to leave society if I had better skills as a backwoodsman, or if I could do anything with my hands on my own, I would probably do that. I think it's another way to. It's the same thing. It's the same answer to the question you just asked. It's a way to find what is bedrock. Like if I take away all these cultural and modern day associations of whatever living in a city means, and I get back to the desert and I just strip things down, what remains? What do I start? How do I start thinking? How does my thinking? I'm not, if I can't get up and check my phone, I'm not thinking about what's happening in Washington. I'm thinking about something else. And maybe that's what I should be thinking about.
Did having this book under your belt during a pandemic when we all are quite isolated, did that
Yeah,
did that give you thought?
it did. I had finished this book over a year ago, and I was talking to my publisher, like, when do we put it out? And because I was early, I finished it probably 6 months before I was expected to, or
Okay.
I expected myself to finish it. And so I was like, yeah, well, I got it. Let's publish it, you know. And this is before the pandemic. And obviously it couldn't be rushed out like in a month. You know, there's a runway that you got to hit, and there are things you got to do. But he said, well, looking at like this, you're going to run up into the election. You know, let's just wait until after the election. And I was like, that's another year. I mean, I think we sat down in January before the pandemic of March or whatever it was. And I was slightly disappointed in that, just because I had it and I was like, let's, you know, get it out.
Yeah.
But what happened was, as we were last summer, I met these two guys, filmmakers, Tyler Nelson and Mike Schwartz, who did a movie called Peanut Butter Falcon last year, which is a terrific movie. And they wanted to make this as a TV series. And I thought, well, I had never thought of that. And so we started pitching it, and we set it up with, ultimately we set it up with Showtime, and I hope to develop it for them. But as we were pitching it, it was actually one of my agents on these mass Zoom calls that we'd have, a nightmare trying to pitch, you know, to the Brady Bunch every time. You know,
Yeah.
and he said, you know, we can, this, now I'm pitching it in the middle of the pandemic last summer. And Mark Corman, my agent, said, this is something we can also relate to now. David wrote this before the pandemic, but this is about taking your family out of society so they can be safe, you know, and we're all asking ourselves that question now when the you know, like literally congestion in society is what is contagious and can kill us. And how do we remove ourselves from that? So I was like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that, but okay.
It's a really fascinating premise, and as I say, it's a really a timely premise as well. Is you know, I was thinking about the Craft Legacy that came out in 2020.
Yeah.
That was your first acting role in a few years. Did you consciously step away from acting at all to focus on writing
No.
and music?
I mean, I think my time was taken away a little bit, but what happened was after Aquarius was done, which is I think maybe 2018. I wanted to wait and I wanted to, like, I knew that I was going to do another show, but I just didn't know what it was, and I wanted it to be special. I mean, I didn't necessarily have to work for money, or, you know, didn't have to be the most popular show. It just had to, and now Hollywood was like opened up into all these vendors, you know, you didn't have to have mass popularity. You could actually hit a niche, and, you know, maybe you could, plus it wouldn't have to run 10 years, and maybe it would run 2, maybe it would run 3. It's like, all these things were good to me. And I tried a couple of different, we went out, developed a couple of different ideas, but none of them caught, you know. So I wasn't trying to step away. I just didn't want to step into something that wasn't really, really interesting to me. And then the Craft happened just like right before the pandemic. So I was like, okay, I haven't done a movie in a while. It's not a lead role or anything, but it's a cool reboot idea. And I dug the patriarchal kind of villain, So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then the pandemic hit, and then I was like, okay, not working now, another year. So it seems like a long spate, and I guess it is, but it wasn't conscious. No, it wasn't a plan.
Well, I want to take a listen to a bit of your new single now. This is called Laying on the Tracks.
Part of you that needed love, you had to kill, you had to make it pay, but it keeps slipping through the cracks. You cannot fill this shadow, you can't slay.
That is Laying on the Tracks, the new song by my guest David Duchovny. The full album isn't out yet. You put out that song before the U.S. presidential election. What did you want that song to say about how you were feeling?
I just felt like, all these conflicts that were coming up were, they were exacerbated by Trump's abrasive personality, but they were also, as cooler heads were pointing out, and as the Black Lives Matter movement was pointing out, they were part of an American story, an ongoing American story. And I wanted to kind of write a song that acknowledged that in a way, poetically, without, okay.
See you later.
Without, no, it's all right. Without.
Who's that?
It's my brother.
Oh, right on.
He was swimming in the pool.
Oh, right on.
So kind of, it was that kind of obscure statement of, I remember this old phrase, I can't remember the speech, but it's like, you throw your shoulder against the gears of oppression. Like, do you know that speach?
It sounds familiar.
Remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like my version of like laying on the tracks. Like I'm gonna put my body in the form of a song anyway, along the tracks of this train that's barreling down on all of us. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna do what I can to stop it. And it's nothing. It's just a song. It's just one person. But it was kind of, I wanted to go on record as saying, I'm on this side of history. I want to be on this side of history, and I want to do what I can to stop that train that's barreling at us.
Are you able to have any optimism now of the next 4 years?
I certainly have optimism, but there's a lot of shit that Trump did that's, I mean, he gutted the bureaucracy. He gutted competence. It's not just the flashy shit, that you can kind of reverse pretty quickly. Whatever's happening, border wall, you can, you don't build it anymore. All that kind of shit. Tax cuts, you try and write a more equitable tax code again. It's that back and forth, but the pernicious, like, institutional shit that his people were able to do, the gutting, like I said, gutting of a competent bureaucracy, and of course the judges. That's going to be tough. 4 years of being out of the climate accords. If the pandemic was good for anything, it lowered levels of pollution, right? So somehow we got under the numbers. And I remember Ivanka Trump tweeted, how well America's emissions had been, in the past year, because everybody stayed at home because your dad let the pandemic run wild. It's just the shamelessness of these people is just stunning. But so yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic because I think Biden's a good manager. He may not be, Mr. Inspiration, but he knows how to pick a good team. I think he's picking great people. I think he's picking competent people. And I don't really care that much. I mean, I do care. I have my own views, but to me, it's important that you're competent if you're going to have a government job. And the saddest and most destructive thing I think that Trump did was he hired a lot of incompetent people, because competent people wouldn't want to work for that guy.
What I'm finding really interesting about this conversation, and maybe this is a good way to end it, is that, when I asked you about your novel off the top, what is it about religious persuasion? You said, well, it interests me whether there's an underlying thing against all the big cultural tides, right? Same thing when I asked you about what about the decision to write about moving into the desert, same kind of thing. Ask you about writing a song. Why did you write the song? Well, it's about trying to throw your shoulder, laying on the track, trying to stop this, right? It says to me that you believe at least that art has some ability to do something here, that art has a role in perhaps talking to people who may not be as easily brought together.
I do. I don't think I would want to do it as badly as I do along the forms that I try to do it in if I didn't believe that. However, art is not politics, and art isn't a political statement. In fact, it's way more complicated than that. And art, I think, gets to the bedrock. I mean, if we can, I would tidily wrap this in a bow and say that art would be my religion in that way, in the way that it's always going to the bedrock of what it is to be human. That's what art is, and it's not the bedrock of what it is to be Democrat, Republican, black, white, whatever. It's the bedrock of humanity. And that transcends politics, that transcends cultural movements. And that's why we still love great art that was written 2,000 years ago, and it lasts, because we don't care who won, who Pontius Pilate beat to become judge of whatever he was judge of. We care about the story that was told because it spoke to something transcendently human in all of us. And we keep telling it to each other, and because we keep having to remind each other what it is to be human.
That's a beautiful way to end it. All I can think is you must be very confusing sometimes for people in LA who are motivated by other things when they go, what is he getting on with about humanity?
Yeah, well, I would never pitch a show like that.
But it is lovely to hear, and it's inspirational actually at a moment like this when we kind of need it.
Well, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a pretentious dick, I say things like that, but I truly believe, I am truly moved by great art, and I have to feel like that can continue no matter who's in office.
David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.